after queen takes d5, I think there are many schools of thought about how we should proceed as white. But there's one plan which is used at the top level, and I think it's the main reason that people can't get away with playing Scandinavian against grandmasters. And I'm going to do my best to repeat this plan for you. So you start by developing your pieces in the good way. And then you make this threat. It's actually not a real threat. We're going to do this discover attack thing, right? But it's not actually going to win any material. So people have a way of underestimating it. And a lot of the books that on the Scandinavian that were written in the last 100 years, they recommend that you play a move like bishop f5, and this I think is extremely reasonable, so we can't criticize them too much. So our plan doesn't depend on black blundering. If they do this good thing, white has a really good move. What do you guys think white should play here? They have a discover attack on the queen, but we have to decide how to use it. Okay, so knight d5 with the idea of knight e3. Why do you want your knight on e3 in this position? Challenge the bishop. Okay. Do you think that bishop on f5 is a good bishop or a bad bishop? See, in this pawn structure, we can kind of predict that black is going to play e6. So it's actually the bad bishop. Maybe you guys aren't familiar with the definition of a bad bishop or a good bishop. I think we need to invent some new terminology, because the term good and bad, it sounds like it's something of, I don't know, where the whole character of the bishop is determined by this one thing. So just level with me. I don't like this terminology, but this is what it is. So people say that a bishop is good if it's on the opposite color of the majority of the pawns, especially center pawns. And they say that a bishop is bad in the opposite case. If the bishop is on the same color as the center pawns or the majority of pawns, then that bishop is going to be, if it's on the opposite, it's good. Okay? It's bad if it's on the same. And the reason that they say that is if the pawns are fixed on one color, the bishop becomes less mobile if it's on that color. When the pawn structure is flexible, we don't really care that much about good bishop versus bad bishop. But when the pawns get more and more fixed or unable to advance for whatever reason, tactical or strategic, or they just literally can't move, we have to start thinking about if the bishop's good or bad. There's another side to it. There's also active bishop versus passive bishop. So I would characterize the bishop on f5 as bad, but active after their move e6. Because the pawns on c6 and e6 will be light. There's no way to maneuver around them. But the bishop is attacking some important squares, like the center. So I don't think that it makes that much sense to try to challenge this bishop, because the bishop is already not such a big deal. And besides, even if you put your knight on e3 in one move, let's pretend you play knight d5, queen d8, knight e3. They'll play bishop g6, so you haven't neutralized that bishop. You've just attacked it for one move. So if you're playing knight d5, it's actually for a different reason. Any other ideas from you guys? Yeah, knight f6, exactly. So this is basically like the refutation. Don't tell Edward from Rutgers Chess Club. He loves this opening. So we take, and if they take with the e pawn, their position's not really enviable. So g takes is the thing that people usually do. And the play might continue with knight f3, e6, this prophylactic move, bishop b3, queen e2. Notice that the c2 pawn will be hanging if they didn't play bishop b3. And after queen c7, the move knight h4. This is a really good move. So I would say that this trade, knight d5 to f6, it costs you kind of two moves, but the thing is they make two not so good moves themselves in response because it's also a forcing move. So it doesn't really cost you any time to make this exchange, and it messes up their pawn structure. They can't really play for a win on the king side in the endgame because of the pawn structure. And on top of that, because the pawn structure is bad, there's a way that white can nab the bishop pair eventually if they want it, and it starts with this knight h5 move. So here they basically have to play bishop g6, at least that's the impression I'm under. And white has a lot of flexibility. I don't really know everything about this position, but I can tell you that if white can pressure black into making more weaknesses, they're going to definitely have the advantage in the endgame. Because black already has a bad pawn structure, and they can play knight takes g6 in a timely manner and get the bishop pair, which is also great in the endgame. Any issues with this? I'm sure you can find some database games from this position if you want to see some examples of how it's done.